Well, with us being on the cusp of the sequel later this week, no better time than right now to discuss Twister from 1996, one of the highest grossing movies of that year. And when you go back and rewatch Twister almost 30 years later, it feels like a huge blockbuster. And it was one of, if not the highest grossing movie of 1996 per my research. My folks were two of the many people that went that summer to the theater to see it. And actually just talking to them, this was around the time that my folks were actually out in North Carolina when my dad was stationed out at Fort Bragg while he was in the Army. And my mom was pregnant with me at the time. So I was sort of there to see Twister that day in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Obviously, either way, I wouldn't have remembered it. But even going back and rewatching it for the purposes of this review and for getting ready for the sequel, this movie is still a lot of fun. We're set during the approach of the most powerful storm in decades. Our hero is a university professor, Dr. Joe Harding, played by the extremely solid Helen Hunt, in what may be her most recognizable role. She, alongside an underfunded team of students, prepare the prototype for a groundbreaking tornado data gathering device conceived by her estranged husband, played by the late Bill Paxton. And fittingly enough, since they're tackling tornadoes, or storm catchers as they're known, they call this device Dorothy. Do you get it? Because Wizard of Oz? Yeah, that might hit the nail too far on the nose. Yeah, Wizard of Oz, that's a movie I may have to review soon with Wicked coming out. But when Dr. Harding tells Bill that Dorothy is ready for testing, and that their privately funded rival, Dr. Jonas Miller, played by Cary Elwes from The Princess Bride, has stolen the idea and built his own, Bill rejoins his estranged wife for one last mission. And that last mission is a high-octane thrill ride. Twister is the ultimate definition of a mid-90s summer blockbuster. Like, it looks like one, it feels like one, it's shot like one, it's edited like one. Mark Mancina's music feels like it belongs in a summer blockbuster. Funny enough that you have Mark Mancina attached with this score, because the director of this movie, Jan de Bont, also did Speed a couple years before this. A lot of the same technical team that we were used to with Speed. And I think what this movie does most effectively, above all else, is it establishes the threat of nature. This is a perfect quintessential example of where man takes on nature, and you don't really have any real villains per se. I mean, you do have a fraud played by Cary Elwes, but even then he sort of feels shoehorned to be a villain. The main obstacle is this Twister. And I feel like the marketing team did a fabulous job in instilling fear in the audience, not even just in terms of premise. The poster, the VHS cover, like, I saw that on my shelves for years as a kid, and I did not touch that thing. Like, even looking at the cover of this Blu-ray, like, it instills so much fear in you. And even though you do have some horror flavor in here, this is ultimately an action-adventure summer movie. Just in terms of how exciting things are, some of the dialogue in here feels very funny, and it feels like a summer blockbuster. And you have an all-star lineup here. Like I mentioned Helen Hunt earlier, this is probably what people recognize her most for, is her performance in Twister. And she's really good. You definitely get behind her character quite a bit, as you do with Bill Paxton. May the man rest in peace. He's known for a lot. This is probably his biggest starring performance here, and he certainly lives up to that opportunity, and he takes it by the horns. He is really good in here, sharing great chemistry with Helen Hunt. Like, as I mentioned, this cast is stacked. Cary Elwes plays an asshole doctor incredibly well. Like, I don't think there's anything that guy can't do. He's so underrated. You also have Alan Ruck Cameron from Ferris Bueller's Day Off appearing in this. He was also in Jan de Bont's Speed. He's really good with the opportunities he has as well. And you also have a very young Seymour Hoffman throwing in so much energy and charisma into this performance. He is so much fun to watch. Everybody is. Like, you feel the danger in this movie. There's too many memorable scenes and chase sequences to really count here. One that comes to mind is, of course, the drive-in movie theater sequence where the audience is watching Shining and you have a Twister coming in the background. Like, if these people are not hammering home that this is a scary-ish movie, that image right there is enough. And there's loads of crazy but plausible situations. That's what makes Twister frightening, is that even though the scripts can be very silly at times, the script is still smart enough to ground itself in enough reality to where you feel like this stuff can actually happen. And I think the screenwriters, director Jan de Bont, do a marvelous job capturing that. And even as a thriller, for the most part, 30 years later, almost 30 years later, I don't want to make myself feel too old right now, but a lot of these effects still very much hold up. If I'm really nitpicking anything, I would say that some of the CGI doesn't really translate as well to 2024. For example, when Helen Hunt spots a cow being spun up in the cyclone, yeah, it kind of looks a little fake, a little choppy, doesn't it? Some of the explosion effects I feel like would have certainly benefited from coming out if it were like 20 years after 1996. Probably would have looked a lot cleaner and a lot more realistic. But honestly, what makes this movie fun is not just the premise and the environment that you're set in. It really is the effort of every single talent that's involved here. Director Jan de Bont does a great job with this. Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt are great heroes. Cary Elwes gives a very fun performance. I mean, there really is a lot to love about Twister, guys. And I'm very glad I went back and revisited this before the sequel comes out, just so I can refresh myself on what a Stormcatcher actually is. Plural now. So that means these Twisters should be more threatening. I don't know, we'll see. So even though some of the CGI doesn't hold up in today's day and age, Twister is still a perennial favorite from the mid-90s, which is a revered era in cinema, especially from what I've experienced from it. And I think if you haven't seen this movie in a long time like I have, you're going to be in for a really fun time. I'm going to give Twister an A-. Which, if we're looking at a tornado grade, is an F5. This is a very, very strong blockbuster. You experience the highest amount of thrills and the ultimate amount of fun. Let me know what you think of Twister down in the comments section. Did you guys happen to check this one out in theaters? Do you have any memories from 1996 and seeing it? Lots that we can discuss and then some. Hit that subscribe button if you've stumbled upon this channel for the first time today. Hit that thumbs up as well if you haven't done so already. And stay tuned for my review of Twisters. I'm looking forward to watching it this Wednesday at an early access screening. And a review is soon to follow after I watch it, guys. I cannot freaking wait. Lots more movies to talk about this summer, guys. Y'all are the best. And with all that being said, Back Talk, commence.